Welcome to Imperfect Genius, the podcast that provides insights into the business development journey and offers advice on building successful careers in the tech industry. I'm your host, Rachel Foster, a tech professional, educator, and entrepreneur. Hey, everybody. So this week, almost to the day that this episode is going to be published, is the 2-year anniversary of the launch of the Imperfect Genius brand. Yay! So I thought I would provide you all with an entrepreneurial update. So just because I've been talking about some changes and ended last year talking about that, started this year saying we were figuring some things out. So I thought, with the 2-year anniversary here, we should just do a little bit of an update. And I'm going to start with a clarification. So when I say it's the 2-year anniversary of the launch of the brand, it's important to note that my business, the corporation that is behind the brand, has existed for 10 years. When I started off the business, it was to do corporate consulting. It's a long story, but I was in the corporate consulting realm. I had been working through a contracting firm, and then that contracting firm was no longer an approved vendor for the company I was working for. And I just said, well, let's just do corp to corp. I'll just create my own corporation, which it was something I had done previously with my previous business when I had a franchise. And so I knew how to do that. And I said, I'll just spin up a corporation and we'll just do corp to corp for billing. So it was initially, the corporation was initially created specifically for corporate consulting. And I don't want to say it was a pass through, but basically it was just a way to build the company. So the business was 100% my time. Was dependent 100% on my time because it was just me billing the company, and then I paid myself a salary. I took some of the income and used that for business expenses, and because there's like insurance and all kinds of other things. So I didn't take 100% of what was paid for that contract. Some of that went to the business, and then some of it went to me as salary. And I did that for a number of years, and then when I was leaving that contract, I did that for like 6 years. And then when I was leaving that contract, I chose not to close the business. What I wanted to do was, I knew that at some point I wanted, I was, getting close. I keep talking about retirement. One of these days it's going to happen, but I was getting closer and closer to retirement. I had been, been working since I was like 2 years old, not really, but felt like it. And so I wanted to build something that I could use as a passive income stream in retirement. Or if not, maybe not 100%. At the time, I wasn't thinking 100% passive income, but I just wanted something that could be a revenue stream in retirement that could augment Social Security, assuming Social Security even still exists once I retire. So I didn't want to close the bid. I had already done the work to establish it and, do all the filings, and I had all the insurance, and it existed, and there's a lot to get to a business to that point, much less run it for a number of years. So I didn't want to have to start over at some point later whenever I got around to retirement. So I decided I would leave the business open, and I was always doing, even when I was doing the corporate consulting previously, I was always doing side gigs, helping out small business owners or individuals. And I would, bill them also through the business. So I was like, well, I do have other, it wasn't much to speak of, but I said I do have other, income streams. So I'm going to leave the business open. So that way, whenever, because, okay, I'm going to go on a tangent here for a second, but, being a techie since, way back when, and everybody, all my friends, family, and neighbors knowing that I'm a techie, people are always asking me for help or advice. And so it got to the point where I was like, why am I giving this away for free? So, it got to the point where people would ask me, hey, can you help me with this? And I'd say, sure, these are my rates, and, of course, that didn't go over so well for people who'd been asking me for years and getting my time for free for years. But I was like, hey, look, I've got a business now and I charge for these things and these are my rates. And, so that was that. So all that to say, aside from the corporate consulting, I still had, income coming into the business for small business consulting, but I was doing it very sparsely and sporadically because I was working 100% of the time elsewhere. So anyway, when I left corporate consulting the first time, or I've left it so many times now, but when I left it back then, I said, okay, I'm going to leave the business open and I'm going to continue to do little things here and there until I figure out what I want it to be. And then a couple of 2.5 years ago, I was on medical leave from my full-time job. So that was, not as a consultant, but as an employee. So I was on medical leave from my full-time job. And I had 6 weeks to just kind of chill. I mean, yes, technically I was recovering from surgery, but I mean, it felt like I was just chilling. And I was like, man, this is what I want my retirement to be. I was like, this is the life right here. And I was just like doing the things that I was like, what would I do in retirement? And I was just like figuring out the things that I wanted to do. And I was like, I need to figure out a way to make this my life. I need to figure out a way to make it so that this is my everyday life independent of retirement. And so that's when I jokingly talk about how I came up with the fever dream that was Imperfect Genius. I had an idea of some things that I wanted to do with regard to empowering small business owners, specifically women small business owners, and also wanting to give back to women of color in the technology industry, because it's such a hard thing to do, because we're always there's not a whole lot of us in the tech space. So I wanted to do some things there. So I started coming up with some ideas of what I wanted to do, and spent some time. I was doing this while I was still working. Well, once after my medical leave was up and I went back to work, I was still this was still something I was working on and trying to figure out how to do. And then finally, ended up happening was I got to the point where it was really, the ball was really rolling. It's kind of like the small snowball effect, where it was, growing and growing. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is like a real thing. This is like a whole, I mean, of course, I already had a business, but it was like, wow, this is a whole business. And then I had to decide, because I wasn't able to split my time. I wasn't doing it effectively. I wasn't doing a very good job of it, splitting my time between the business and corporate. And I said, you know what? The only way that I'm ever going to know if this is really going to work is if I leave and go do it full time. So I made the decision that that's what I was going to do, that I was going to leave corporate. Again, this was not the first time I chose to leave corporate. It had happened multiple times before. But I said, okay, I'm going to leave corporate. I'm going to spend 100% of my time working on this idea, and I'm going to see where it goes. So I left corporate, and it took me a few months, because I feel like I had some separate from my earlier medical leave. I had some health issues that I was dealing with for a few months. So I left corporate and then immediately was bogged down with some health issues and dealing with some stuff. So I didn't really get going right away. So it took a few months. Like, I left corporate in November, and it took some time. And it wasn't until the end of February that I finally, launched the brand. And also there was the issue when I've talked about this previously on the podcast. There was the issue with the name and the trademark, because previously it had a whole different name and the podcast had a different name, and none of that worked out because of the trademark. I couldn't get the trademark, and then I had to come up with a new name and come up with new branding and new color scheme. And it was just a whole thing. So it took a while after I left corporate to actually kick it off. And so it was February of 2020. Wait, am I wrong? Is it 2 years ago? No, it's 2024. Yeah. Okay, now I feel like I need to go check a calendar. Uh, but it was February. I want to say it was February of 2024. Hopefully now I'm questioning myself. But so 2 years ago, February, I launched the brand, and it was like a month or two later that the podcast launched. I should have looked these things up before I started recording. I never do that. Well, if I'm doing a solo episode, if I don't have an outline, this is one of those times. If I haven't written out a script outline, I'm just like free forming it, and I'm like, oh, I should have looked that up before I started recording. Anyway. So I launched it 2 years ago. So when I say it's the 2-year anniversary of the brand, I literally mean the brand Imperfect Genius, not the business, the corporation that is behind the brand. And so the good news is I'm not going out of business, because a lot of businesses fail in the first 2 years. So yay, there's that. But as I mentioned at the end of last year, because of the insane healthcare crisis in this country and just all kinds of nonsense going on, again, I mentioned this previously, my healthcare premiums were going to, I don't even know what the word is for, it's not quadruple. What is six? It was going up 6 times. Like my healthcare premium was going to be 6 times what it was last year. Beginning this year, it was going to be 600% of what it was previously, which is just completely insane. Just it makes no sense. So I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out. And let me pause for a second. So speaking on for those of you who are, looking into entrepreneurship, and just to give you the details behind this, if in case you've not heard me talk about this before. So when you're you work for yourself, it's not like when you're working in corporate and you just sign up for your benefits. You have to figure out how you're going to pay your benefits, how you're going to have health insurance and dental and vision and all of that. And there's a couple different ways to do it, but one of the predominant ways, especially if you're a solopreneur, meaning it's just you running the business, you do the healthcare marketplace. And even if you don't do that, it's still the premiums are crazy no matter which way you go these days. But you have to figure out how you're going to do it, and you don't get the group discounts. You don't get So basically, when you're working in corporate America, what's happening is that company has got they're like, hey, we got this many employees or whatever, so we can sign up for the group discount. So you're getting a group discount, plus your company is probably paying a good portion of those premiums, and you just have to pay a supplemental amount. Now, mind you, I have heard from people who work in corporate that even the corporate, the amount that they have to pay as employees has gone up tremendously. So I know it's crazy everywhere, but when you're doing it on your own and you don't have a company that's paying any portion of it, or B, the group discount, so you just got to pay like, the premium rate, like the highest rate possible. It's very costly. It's very, very costly. And again, my premium was going up 600%. So I was like, that's not workable. That's not feasible. So I need to figure out a way. Either I need to go back to, work full time as an employee somewhere and get healthcare that way, or I need to find a way to get a group discount, or take a consulting gig that pays a high enough rate that I can cover this, and even honestly, my thought process is, even if I got a contract gig that paid a high enough rate that could cover it, I did not want to pay it. I was just like, this is a ridiculous amount of money to ask for. I don't want to do it. So I ended up taking a corporate consulting gig where I'm still a contractor. I'm working through a pass-through company that is offering me, instead of doing corp to corp, we're doing W-2, so that I can take advantage of the group discount for for healthcare. So instead of having to pay, I'm still paying a ridiculous amount of money, but it's not as much. I at least get the discount, right? So anyway, so I ended up having to do that. But that also means that I'm giving 40% or 40, not 40%, 40 hours a week of my time to, a business that is not mine. Now, again, technically that's revenue for me, for the business. But what I don't want is, I don't ever want, like, going forward, because again, I am getting closer to, it's been 10 years since I started this business, but I am getting closer to retirement age, and who knows what age that is anymore. Because yeah, at this point in the US, I don't even know, like, that we even get to retire. We just have to work until we, like, just drop. But I am getting closer to a age that could be considered retirement age. And so what I don't want is, I don't want the business to be 100% dependent on my time. I really need the business to have passive revenue streams. I mean that's the dream. When you start a business, when you want to be an entrepreneur, the dream is that you're buying yourself freedom. The idea is that you could theoretically be on a beach somewhere, sipping Mai Tais while work is being done, by your employees or by someone, or maybe, it's an online course and people are taking it and you don't have to be there. Whatever it is, the idea is you're buying yourself time and freedom, and you don't have to give 100% of your work time or your work week to this thing. So what I don't want is, I don't want the business to ever be dependent upon me working 40 hours a week. Because then, what's the point? That's just a job. That's just a job where you can't even say no to the boss, because if you say no, you don't get paid, right? Because you are the boss. And so if you don't do the work, then you don't get paid. And so you don't pay yourself. So I was like, okay, I still got to figure some things out. So now, yeah, I have to go back, and I'm working 40 hours a week, doing this contract gig, but I have to figure out how the business can survive this and how it can continue to grow. Well, at least not not shrink. Well, it's going to shrink a little bit, but I have to figure out a way to sustain the business independent of my time. Because yeah, I could just take all of the, not all of it, but I mean, I could take the money that I'm making through the contract gig and throw it back into the business. But then the business never learns how to like function on its own, right? Because it's just dependent upon me giving it capital, and that's not a functional business. So I need the business to have its own revenue streams independent of my time, and to continue to at least exist for a while, and then at some point, grow those revenue streams so that I can step away from. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with healthcare? But if I were to put healthcare aside for a second and ignore that as a, I mean, you can't, but if I was to ignore that as a factor in the business, then theoretically, I want the business to have revenue streams that would allow me to, again, just chill on a beach somewhere while it's making money and still be able to pay me profit and or owner's equity or whatever, or pay a paycheck as the CEO, whatever it is, be able to pay me some money and still and make money without me having to actually be working in the business all day, every day through the work week. So all that to say, so I'm trying to figure out how do I make that happen? Spoiler alert, I don't have the answers yet. So I'm still trying to figure that out. I have some thoughts. I have a couple of different income streams that could be completely passive. I just need to work on what I need to do to grow those so that they're making some money. I am closing some things down. So for example, if you were been listening to me for a while, you know that I had the Imperfect Genius community, and it still exists right now. I am in the process of shutting it down from the community aspects of it. So my courses exist inside the same space on the same platform as the community. So I'm going to continue to keep the courses open, and I'm building new courses. In fact, I'm doubling down on courses. So I'm going to build some new courses, and the idea of those being self-paced. Now, previously, the courses had included my time. So it included my coaching time. And that may not be a component of the courses going forward, because again, that's something that's dependent on my time, and I don't really have a whole lot to give anymore. So I'm trying to figure that out. There's the podcast. I got to figure out whether or not I'm going to continue. I mean, I'm continuing through the end of this season, which is going to run through late May, early June. So I'm definitely continuing through the end of this season, but then I have to decide, do I continue beyond that? And if so, does it still look the same? Am I still putting out an episode every 2 weeks? So I got to figure out, what am I doing there? And am I going to start doing premium content where, I got subscribers so that, there's an income stream there aside from sponsors and ads and things like that. So I got several things going on. There's a new course that there's multiple new courses that I'm planning on writing. But then the other thing I'm struggling with right now is I had obligations that I had committed to before I took the full-time gig. And I'm still trying to honor those. So like, I got so many things going on right now. I am so exhausted. But, hopefully those obligations will wrap up soon so that I can, step back. And I really need to step completely back and just look at it from, then when I say it, I mean the brand, the business, from like the 100-foot level, and then start to drill back in again. Like I need to I keep telling people I'm in a rebuilding phase. Like if I was a sports team, I'm in a rebuilding phase. I'm figuring some things out. So like I say, the good thing is I'm not closing, and a lot of businesses close in 2 years. And I feel like this is a lot of what I'm saying right now is reminiscent of the conversation that I had with Kristen Irish Johnson last fall, where she was talking about what she was doing with her business. And sometimes you just get to that point where you got to stop and you're like, okay, I need to adjust because, some things aren't working, and I need to go do this over here or that over there. And you just need to figure out, okay, what's the way forward? So it's not all right, that's it, I give up, I'm throwing in a towel, but I need to figure out, how do I keep going? And honestly, that is entrepreneurship in a nutshell. It's how do you keep going? And a lot of times it's about capital. It's like, oh, I don't have enough money to keep going or something like that. That is not my problem. My problem is, okay, I got to figure out the timing. I mean, it's so demanding and I got so many things I'm trying to do and there's just me. And yes, I would love to hire people to help me out. But again, I'm trying to I feel like the business is a child that I'm trying to teach a lesson. Like I need the business to if the business can't afford, let's just say like I would love to have a personal assistant. If the business can't afford a personal assistant, then I don't get to have a personal assistant. Yes, I could pay for a personal assistant out of my own money, but again, it would be a personal assistant to the CEO of the business. And if the business can't afford that, then no, then you don't, I don't get to do that. It's just sort of, I'm following I mentioned this before and I'm going to butcher this guy's name and I apologize. I want to say his first name is Mike, but I want to say his last name is Miklovich, but he wrote this book called Profit First. And it's really not a new once you listen to it, it's not all that new a concept for, especially for, people who have, people of color who have grandmothers who used to have envelopes of money. But basically, it's basically about you just have, you have your money for your rent set aside for your rent. You got your money for groceries. You got your money in these different envelopes. And if there's not money in the envelope, then the thing doesn't get done. It doesn't get paid for. So, if I've got an envelope for the business for expenses and I got envelope for taxes and an envelope for profit and an envelope for owner's equity, et cetera. I've got these different envelopes of money in the business. If the expenses envelope is empty, then I don't get to buy it. Like whatever it is that I think I need or I want, if the business can't afford it, then I don't get to buy it. Now, those envelopes could have money in them if I took all the money from my corporate consulting and divvied them up, based on percentages of how much I want to go in each envelope. But I am trying to train the business to be able to function without my time. So I'm trying to figure out how to not take all of the revenue that I earned individually for my time and just dump it in those envelopes. I'm trying to find other ways to put money in those envelopes, if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm rambling now. So I'm trying to figure out how to fund the business independent of my time. And I'm currently not giving the business the money that I'm making from the corporate gig. Unless I have to. I mean, if I got to pay a tax bill or an insurance bill or whatever, and there's no money there, then I pay it. But again, I'm trying to build the business so that it functions. So it's functional. And if you're paying for things and you didn't earn it, you don't have the income, then it's not functional. You're living in the red. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to depend on capital infusion in order for the business to survive. The business needs to be able to pay its own bills. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. How do I do that independent of my time? So, like I say, I'm figuring some things out, but I am proud that I'm not closing. Again, 2-year anniversary and had to shift tremendously because of healthcare, but I'm keeping going. I haven't figured it all out yet. I am still thinking about it, and I got some ideas, and hopefully in the next few episodes, like my next episode, we're going to talk about networking and some other things that I'm wanting to do. I've mentioned the speed networking before. I want to really dig into the networking, and I'm going to do an episode on that. I think that'll be the next episode, and then re-kick off the speed networking events that I was trying to do. And I've just got some other irons in the fire that I want to sort of work through. But anyway, I thought I would give you all an entrepreneurial update. Hopefully that's something that you want to hear. I don't know. You guys don't talk to me. I know you're out there because I see the download numbers and I know that you're in multiple countries. I see all the download numbers, but I don't get a whole lot of feedback or thoughts on topics or what you guys want to hear. So when you guys don't tell me, I'm just going to ramble or I'm just going to talk about what I want to talk about and hopefully you find it entertaining. And so until next time, this is Rachel Foster reminding you why your journey may not be, how did I forget my tagline? Your journey may not be flawless. It can be phenomenal. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, let's try that again. So until next time, this is Rachel Foster reminding you while your journey may not be flawless, it can be phenomenal.